Welcome to Unplugged Live with Dr. Diane Smith-Clark, PhD. Get ready to get inspired by the stories of overcoming life's challenges to bring change and transformation. Here's Dr. Diane.
Hi, I'm Dr. Diane Clark, and I am here with Unplugged. Tonight's segment will be part 2 of depression and mental anxiety among our youth. We covered this depression and stress in the pulpit. We covered it in the pew. We talked about it among the teenagers, and now we're dealing with our youth. I think it's very important that we become an informed community so that we can help our children, because children who have extreme stress or mental disorders grow up to be adults with mental health issues. And if we can tackle this while they are young, we can prevent some of the social ills that we're seeing today. I want to invite you to please like and share us on Facebook. And by all means, leave your comment. Let us know how you're enjoying the show, or if you would like to be a guest. We're also on YouTube. If you would subscribe to our YouTube channel, that way you will know when we're on. We're also on Instagram, all of the social media outlets. So we welcome your comments. Let us know that you're interested in the information that we're sharing with you. Tonight, we're going to continue with part 2, talking about mental health and our children. It has vastly become a problem due to the social determinants in our society and in our culture. Children are living with incarcerated parents. They're living with abuse. Some of them are living with neglect. And it is often overlooked how the child is able to handle those situations. But we want to bring awareness to you. So if you know a child or you have a child in your home that may be experiencing these adverse childhood experiences, please, by all means, get help. Contact a behavioral specialist, contact a service in Jacksonville that can help you with your child. I'm going to invite to the stage once again Mark Dickerson, who is going to take us further in our conversation. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Dr. Clark. Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. Thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you. Last week, we did get a lot of comments about how they enjoyed the show and how their eyes were open to areas that are not normally discussed in the home, are not even normally discussed at school. All the labels are ADHD usually, overactive. But there are other things that can impact and affect our children, even if they don't act out, even if they don't display negative behavior.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And to your point, Dr. Clark, I have, again, thank you for having me tonight. I just want to dive right in and say that there are certain behaviors that look like ADHD or that look like autism or even some other deficit-like behaviors that sometimes is just related to unresolved stress and unresolved trauma. So I agree 100% with that.
Yeah. And, when we look at traumas that could possibly happen in the home, it can be physical, it can be emotional, and also it can be sexual abuse. And the child is afraid to report it, afraid that they won't be believed, or they don't want to mess up the family. Mark, we have a lot of blended families now. It was not a popular thing just many years ago, but now we have blended families, and you're bringing your children into a new atmosphere, a new environment, and you're just expecting them to adapt because you want to be in the environment.
Yeah, Dr. Clark, you're so right. Well, I've seen that, and it's funny because I'm actually walking a family through right now some of those exact dynamics, blended family, and there are some things that these kids are just exhibiting, right, that are behaviors, but we learned last week, and I truly believe that behaviors are only the language of unmet needs. There are some behaviors being exhibited, some things happening right now in this blended family, and the parents are that I know are kind of resorting to traditional ways of
Mhm.
trying to just manage the behavior or
Mhm.
trying to get compliance and not really digging down to your point to what may be at the root of this behavior, really being inquisitive about what is this behavior saying, right? What am I seeing? What's the need behind this behavior? So yeah, I see that a lot in blended families and families who where they're not blended, just a mother
Yeah.
and father just doing their best to take care of kids, and things are passed down to the children from their forefathers, right? We're talking about Black History Month, and
Yeah.
just celebrating our relatives, and I'm sorry, celebrating our heritage and all of our ancestors. But there are
Mhm.
a lot of things, Dr. Clark, that were passed down to us that we are still exhibiting today that
Yeah.
are in our ancestral lineage, right? Lineage. And we say in the church world, generational curses, right? But in the
Yeah.
brain science world, the word is, it's the same concept, but the word is epigenetics, things that are passed down from one generation to the next. So I see a lot of that, Dr. Clark.
Absolutely, Mark. And what happens is we have generational issues that started as far back as slavery
Mm,
that we are yet incorporating in our current lives, and
mhm,
we don't realize it because it was practiced
mhm.
in previous generations and perhaps practiced when we were coming up. So that whole mindset that went along with slavery, the slavery supposedly ended in 1776, but that did not deliver or free the mind from the abuse, the pressure, the things that were experienced during that time. And you have adults who were never involved in the situation itself, but ideologies, practices have been passed on, and they're still living like they're in slavery. They're still living like I'm a field worker. I don't have any time for recreation or enjoyment. I've got to
Mm,
hit this groove. I got to hit the
mm.
grind, I think is what they call it.
Yes,
We
ma'am.
still have, yeah. And as quiet as it is kept, Mark, we're supposed to be talking about the children, but when you talk about mental health, I mean, the kids are such a important part of that because it starts with us as we're children. We learn and practice those things, that behavior, those actions, feeling isolated when we're not alone,
Mm,
having severe anger and we don't know why. Why do you fight? I don't know.
mm.
I'm just angry and don't know why. And a lot of those are uh, leftover emotions
Yeah.
from what happened to us as a people in slavery. And that's why it's so important that we get this message out, that if you're having a struggle, you're stressed, you're depressed. I mean, excessively. I'm not talking about the everyday. Some stress is good, but
Yes.
stress that impairs your ability to move forward, your ability to have a healthy, normal life, needs to be assisted with some help.
Absolutely, Dr. Clark. And I think so. I'm really grateful for the platform you've created, because these are conversations that I grew up in church, and these are
Yeah,
conversations that just were not had. Right? Had I known that some of the things that I was personally dealing with in my own mind and my own soul, had I known that there was a name for it,
yeah,
and it was not spelled necessarily DEMON. There was a name, there was a reason why. Had I known that some of that molecular leftover trauma from post traumatic, there's a doctor by the name of Dr. Joy DeGruy, and she
hmm,
has a special on YouTube, a symposium on YouTube that she did called Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome. It's incredible. And she talks about all the things that our ancestors went through. And today there's so many interventions available, right? And when we get those interventions over time, the brain, the body, and the beliefs and behavior can heal. But if we've never got any intervention, think about all the things that happened to our ancestors, and
yeah,
those things that were passed down to us. And if there's no intervention, they don't just go away. And unfortunately, you can pray all day. You're a prayer warrior. I'm a prayer warrior, right? We believe in the power of prayer, but that does not just cancel all the things that we have to sometimes walk through. So you're right. Our children face things as children that continues to cycle down through their entire lives.
Mhm.
And if we don't, as a church, become informed, there's nothing wrong with us being educated. Does not deter our reliance on the Holy Spirit. But if we don't educate ourselves, we may be this may be tough. We may be further exacerbating trauma in the hearts and minds of our people when we tell them this is how you get to freedom and it doesn't work.
That's
Now they
right.
have not only unanswered trauma, now they have unanswered um, beliefs. Like, you told me that will work, and that's not working for me. As a matter of fact, I'm getting worse.
Right.
So yeah, there's some things that we as believers in the church have to start digging into. So I'm so grateful that you're having this conversation, Dr. Clark.
It is so necessary, Mark, because just think back when the church began. The ideology of church came from their white slave masters. They would sneak around and listen to what they were saying because we came from other parts of the globe and brought our own
Oh,
religions with us, which was a lot of idolatry and witchcraft and soothsaying is what we practice. And then we start hearing the master's religion and how they related to God and so forth. And you look at the whole idea behind Christianity, the Bible says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. But it's almost like the religion has turned the church world into another bondage.
another
And
form
they're
of bondage.
seeing it as a good bondage, but it's still bondage. Where is this liberty that I was promised? And that's the I think that's the impacting thing that we're having with our Gen Z and even with our
Yes.
millennials, because the things we were taught to just believe in and they're seeing it doesn't work and it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
But we fall back on, well, if any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. Okay, so I am a new creature with issues in my soul that still needs to be worked through, because the pattern is to be not conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So the indication is I have become new the way it has been taught theologically to us, that I'm supposed to be this new person that now has the capacity and ability to not act the way I acted before I received Christ. And it's not deception, but the whole message is not given to the person
Right.
so that they can activate the word in their lives. And it's creating a psychological problem along with the culture that we're now in
Yeah.
and social issues happening around us, that anything goes. And you don't have to believe the Bible anymore. You don't have to trust in God anymore. We're not singing, one day we'll be done with the troubles of this world. We're no
Right.
longer longing for Beulah land and trying to escape. People are trying to deal with life here on the earth. And if you can picture in your mind the challenge it is for us as adults, what about our children? We now have, I think it said, 74% of our children have received already mental health to support through some form or some nature, having most of them being diagnosed with autism, ADHD, too busy, can't maintain, and they're on drugs,
Mm.
they're on medications just to have a semblance of normal life.
Mm. Dr. Clark, and so you said so many amazing things, and that those numbers are staggering. To
Yeah.
know that that many of our children
Hmm.
are being seen, but
Hmm.
not only that, that many of our children are being seen and now they're being labeled,
Yes.
but not just seen and labeled, but there's still very little in depth intervention because
Mhm.
counseling only goes so far.
Mhm.
Therapy only goes so far until our therapists, until our teachers, until our pastors, until our parents, until our
Mhm.
medical facilities, until there is a real desire to heal the human soul for
Yes.
real.
Yes.
We will continue to skate on the surface and placate. And there's big money in that. There's big
Oh,
money in
yeah.
becoming a coach, and there's big money in pharmaceuticals. There's big money
Yeah.
in the educational system that depend that is, you've heard this term before,
Hmm.
that some call the pipeline to prison. That
Hmm.
there's big money in creating systems that don't deal with the issue, that label kids very, and through punitive type actions put them already on the trajectory
Yeah.
to be incarcerated, right? Which continues to fuel the pockets of the powers that be. So our
Right.
children, if we don't start having these conversations now,
Hmm.
from an educated standpoint,
Hmm.
I think we stand the chance of really, again, continuing to exacerbate trauma. I'll say this one last thing, Dr. Clark, about this perfect storm. You were talking about the things that are happening culturally, and the things that our children are not even willing to listen to today based on old world religious views, right?
Right.
So you have this perfect storm. You have a child who has come up differently, and children who are not trying to hear the God of their parents. They're just not trying to hear it. But then you have a culture, right, that does get their attention, that opens them up to so much more, that is so anti God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Hmm.
This perfect blend of all things not God.
Hmm.
So the fight becomes even more ferocious for intelligent, spirit-filled, spirit-led people to really do the work and educate ourselves, educate our children's ministries,
Right.
educate our parents, educate educators about the, the soul's been broken, but the soul can be healed, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't always happen. It doesn't always finish at the altar.
Right.
It doesn't always finish in the confines of the four walls. No, it takes time. It takes patience.
Yes.
It takes intentionality. It takes attunement. It takes skilled people to help people walk out of years of post-traumatic syndrome,
Right.
whether it was passed down to you genetically. Have you ever seen a child in a blended family, Dr. Clark, who, I've seen this several times, but a child in a blended family who never knew their real father,
Oh.
and then is placed in a home with just the mother, or the mother marries another man, and this child never knew his real father. But sooner or later in life, this child starts to exhibit the exact same patterns of a father he's never known,
Hmm.
or a grandfather. He's, how in the world, this kid was only 2 months when we adopted him. How in the world? And we didn't teach him these things.
No.
Where are these things coming from?
Yeah.
They're passed down. They are encoded in our DNA. They're encoded in our molecular structure, and they're encoded in how our brain synapses, how our brains are wired, right? And those things don't change with a Sunday school lesson. No, they just don't.
No. What ideally would be a part of the answer, Mark,
Yes.
is if we could get the church to sit down with psychologists, with psychiatrists, people who actually study mental health and sociology, if they would partner together
Yes.
to address a lot of these
Hmm.
behavioral roles and mindsets, I believe that we would see great improvement and we will be able to even rescue Gen
Mm.
Z and get them turned in the right direction. But
Mm.
the other thing that happened to us was the church, the black church became the staple in our community, a church period.
Mhm.
And what happened with that is the person that was most learned or demonstrated wisdom and knew the right answer to things became the quote unquote leader. And what the rest of the people learned was dependent upon how smart that leader was. And from that, we have the design in the church that the pastor is supposed to know all, do all, be all. And people look to him. And a lot of people don't read for themselves. Just thank God. And after the 50s, people started going to college, get educated, and that caused a division, because now that I'm reading and I'm learning and understanding, if you stand up and tell me something that's not accurate or valid, then I may never say anything vocally, but I'm challenged now. Am
Yes.
I, it's I would to God that we could just pray over these issues and people would be all right. I really do. I don't think there's a deficit in our prayer or
No,
our ability to be heard. There's
no,
nothing wrong with praying. There's
no.
nothing wrong with fasting. I just believe that we need to marry other areas in our culture and society if
Hmm.
we are going to really get to the root of this happenings among us. Right here in our city, we have a young boy, a teenager, that's on trial for his
Yes,
life
yes,
for stabbing another teenager 119 times.
yes.
Now, does that sound like someone who doesn't have some type of mental impairment?
Oh, man.
What goes through your mind?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
And
ma'am.
you would decide, you know what? I'm going to end your life.
Yes, ma'am.
And then had the intelligence to try and hide it.
Mm.
We're going through that now, and we're seeing a rise in black on black crime, police brutality. Why are they being brutal? People say, oh, well, they're scared. They're scared that we're going to attack them. But they just showed a video of a man who was a double amputee
Mm.
crawling on his thigh part that was left from the amputation. He was crawling on that. He had a knife and he was trying to get away. They shot him several times to death.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I just wonder sometimes, well, couldn't they have shot him in the hand that was holding the knife,
Mm.
or could they have had someone on site to try to de-escalate the situation?
Mm.
Because when they went further in the news, it was discovered that he was in a wheelchair, and somebody had bothered him, had done something to him,
Mm.
and he took the knife and stabbed them. But now
Mm.
he's dead.
Dr. Clark, I think that to your point, there are the police and the different people. So I don't, to your point, children who are experience traumatic issues
Mm-hmm.
without any sort of resolution grow up, and mental illnesses grow up to, without any sort of intervention, grow up to be adults with those same issues, and they just get exacerbated over time. And
Right.
I am of the belief right now, and this is where my focus and my study outside of my family and the Word of God has been for some time now.
Mm-hmm.
Organizations, not just people, but organizations also
Mm-hmm.
have traumatic like responses.
That's
Organizations,
true.
because it's the people in the organizations that come to the table, that
Mm-hmm.
get these positions, that get in power, that get these jobs, that get these titles. And if
Right.
they have never dealt with their backpacks, right? What's
Right.
what is in their history, those things don't go away. Those things come to the boardroom. Those things go into the Zoom chats. Those things go into policy. Those things go into the police car. They go into the fire department car. They go into the school with the educators. They go into the medical systems.
Mm-hmm.
Those back
The
that
government, don't leave the government
government,
up.
absolutely. Entertainment,
Yeah.
that baggage doesn't, you don't just drop that baggage off at the door. You
Mm-hmm.
carry that with you everywhere you go. And unresolved trauma, unresolved mental illnesses show up in places where people have not gotten their backpacks checked out, not had their history gone into, right? Have not dealt with those things. And I think those are some of the things that we see as signs and symptoms of
Yeah.
further abusive systems.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It would be great if these talks and other chats that I know are going on would create some type of interlacing or interwoven
Yes.
of the church coming to the aid of the mental health space, the
Yes.
mental aid space, being given an opportunity to operate right out of the church, as
Hmm.
because there are gifts of healings in 1 Corinthians 12. So that
Hmm.
means there are many healings
Healing.
or ways of being healed.
Yes, ma'am.
And nutrition, learning proper nutrition is one way you
Be
can be
healed. That's
healed.
right.
And that helps your body. Physical activity, having a trainer, going to the gym regularly, that helps sustain your life, your organs, your muscles. And we don't really have a space there where we have the church agreeing with, we are set in place by God, by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let's define the one I'm talking about.
Right. Come on.
And we've been given a charge. Our charge here is to heal the soul of man. And we do it through teaching, through preaching, through laying on of hands, and we do it through counseling. Jesus himself was a wonderful
Wonderful counselor.
counselor.
Yes.
So I don't know what the fear is and the intrepidation about seeing a counselor, but with everything that we've covered just in this session, we can see a need for people who have been trained, because you can have an issue and get trained, get therapy, and become a voice to that which first troubled you. You
Yes.
know, and it's such a sad situation that we have not developed. We just have the preaching portion of church and the social person portion where we eat and we do celebrations and what we call fellowship. We need to add another
Another layer.
segment so that people will accept that, oh, this is okay for me to go get help. Because sometimes you only need to talk about your situation.
Yeah.
Talking clears your mind,
Yeah.
unravels a lot of the communication and things, and it challenges you to be more realistic
Yes.
about how your perception is set. But
Yeah.
if you don't have anybody to talk to, or you're talking to somebody that has already taken the attitude, well, I can't help you, I don't know why you're telling me, then
Mm.
that can become discouraging and create yet a different mental illness or mental pressure
Hmm.
that affects your behavior, your actions. We have people in the church who say, oh, I love God with all my heart, but I can't stand you. You're not God. I can see your faults. I can see your
Yeah.
irregularities. I can see all this stuff about you, but I love God. And then he says, well, how can you say you love me if you don't love one another? Where does that come from? There's some mental impairment. There's
Yes.
something that has happened to the individual internally that they haven't been able to process, talk through, and move on. And
Yeah.
that's what this show is about. It was just developed around bringing mental health awareness, and then some of the disparities that we have in our community. But if our churches would come together, because that's where most of our people's faith is in their spiritual leader. If they
Hmm.
would come together and say, we recognize
Hmm.
that we have not completely brought healing to
Hmm.
people's soul. And so
Hmm.
we're going to have a department in our church.
Hmm.
We're going to have once a month, we're going to have a community worker in the social field or mental health field to come in and talk with our people.
Hmm.
Just adding that would mean so much, because then as a parishioner, I would be more comfortable now
Hmm.
going to a counselor or
Hmm.
psychologist and discussing what I'm feeling.
Hmm.
Because I didn't really start getting healing until I went to get therapy.
Yes.
I,
Yes.
I wasn't really nurtured as a child, and this is not against any parent, because parents would get offended and say, I did the best I could. There was nothing else I could do. You're absolutely right. You did the best that you could. But sometimes the child that you have needs more than you can offer.
Yeah.
We have very good parents that work, provide, they love you, they take care of you, but sometimes they're emotionally unavailable.
Yes.
And then you mess around and you have a child that's very emotional and that's always pulling on your emotions. Then now you can see the child processes that as rejection.
Yes.
Or you don't hear me.
Right.
You don't want to be bothered with me.
Right.
And you have exactly right done all that you could. But have you searched in yourself to see why you're emotionally unavailable? And we have so many fathers that are like that. They will provide, they will buy for you, they will do everything, but they are not emotionally available to feel and to sense your needs that would bring wholesomeness to you as a child.
Dr. Clark, and I know that our time is winding up, and you can just, I don't know, do we have time to?
Yeah, we got a few more minutes.
Okay. So again, I've always looked up to you because you're so prolific, and you always open up this vein in my heart that just gets me going. You've always been that way. And we're doing a conversation right now. I think, to your point, it's both it's both the spiritual and the other part, right?
That's a better way to say it.
It's both. It's not neither or. It's either or. It's both and. They go hand in hand, right? And I think that when we, as pastors, as leaders, take down that wall of fear,
yes,
which operates under the umbrella of, well, fear is the umbrella, but then control operates under that umbrella, right? Because once we start educating people and getting them thinking for themselves and really diving into themselves, they begin to heal themselves. And the pastor is no longer the guy who's supposed to heal them. So now you have a church of educated people, which means you got to bump your game up, Pastor, because now you can't just give these people ketchup and mustard. No, these people they're getting it, right? Yeah. So the other thing, Dr. Clark, I think is so important is that we create spaces where we can start pulling down cultural stigmatizations as well. Yeah. Men, big America, westernized culture has defined what manhood is to their standards. I teach this in a barbershop every Saturday morning, so I see this in men every Saturday morning. We have been given this false narrative of what manhood is. And so instead of us understanding that we have been called to be nurturers, instead of us understanding that it is not just okay, it is our responsibility to raise up our kids in the way that they should go, not in the way you want them to go, but the way that they should go. We rob our communities, we rob our wives, we rob our children, we rob our nation of this necessary component of empathy from the man that can also help bring healing. Yes. And if we could establish spaces, and I'm being challenged now to go back and look at our calendar for 2023 and add more of these. We've had these conversations at my church, but to add even more spaces where not just our congregants, but the community, instead of having a fish fry, have an open forum conversation and have some educated people facilitate and let people come and find the help that they need.
Right.
And I think if we do that, we'll begin to serve mankind a whole lot more holistically than just what they're running away from this Sunday morning church experience. They don't want it.
Right. We've definitely seen a change. And you have some camps where the leader has taken on the mentality, I'm responsible for these people, and they control every facet of their lives. There are people who can't make a decision or go enjoy anything without going through their leader. And if he says they can't go, then they don't go. And you have to ask yourself, be honest with yourself, rather, how you feel about that. You're an adult working a job, you have children and a husband, you got bills and a mortgage, and somebody tell you you cannot participate in something. that doesn't click in your mind,
That
because you're
don't
like,
click.
what is it going to do? What's going to happen as a result of this? So it's just that it's the blame game is not on anybody. That's not at all what we're doing. We're trying to raise awareness that we need to become interlaced in our approach
Yes.
if we are going to just de de-escalate
Mm-hmm.
the ills in our social lives, and just that, and in our society. When your 11-year-old daughter can walk up to you and say, you know what, if I want to like girls,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not equipped, what I'm in shock, and then I'm gonna beat you and
No, no,
tell
no.
you what the words say, and
No, no, no.
God said, and you standing there, you 11 with the 11-year-old mentality.
Brain not even fully developed yet.
Yeah, yeah. And you've been watching me because I was your example, right? And let's say build a scenario where um I I had a divorce situation, and then I would date and bring men home, and have relationship with them while you're in the house. So I'm calculating this is what women do in certain situations.
Yes, yes.
And so something in me may not like the idea that you had all these different men come in our place of safety.
Yeah.
And then the little girl say, well, you know what? I'm not even going to deal with men at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's dangerous, what we're doing. We've got to come out of our hypocrisy and be real
Absolutely.
and transparent, because we're just raising our kids to go into danger. That it is said, they taught us in class that if a child can't read by fourth grade, they guarantee you they will be in prison.
Absolutely.
So, how many of us prepare reading campaigns? We think children just need entertainment. They need to be educated. You start in the crib playing music and books, not all the time, but there needs to be some intake of healthy
Intentionality. Yes.
information. Yeah. And so
Mm.
you give them a bunch of games, and now you're giving them 4-year-olds have iPads and cell phones.
And
And
can work.
they're watching anything that they want to watch, and they're learning from technology when their posture should be learning from you. That was a time we wanted to be like our parents. You remember that? I know it's been a while.
Ooh.
When I grow up, I'm going to be like my mom. And
Yes.
these kids now, this when I grow up, I'm going to be like Beyonce. I'm going to be like the rappers, because they're doing it. They have money, and they have popularity, and there we go. And we have no conversation about it. There has to be a turnaround.
There has to be. And so I'll say this last thing, Dr. Clark. Again, I think that we owe it to the people that we influence, people that we have relationships with, to help them to be able to notice some of the trends that may be looking, some of the behaviors, some of the things that we back in the day called bad. I think that we owe it to them to help them be able to recognize when they start seeing these certain things in their children, what this could possibly mean. And then what do I do about it? I have my own crap, my own baggage. What do I do? So I think we owe it to them to remind them that, one, it's okay. You're not alone, but you need to be aware when you start seeing your daughters drastically change in the way they dress, your kids who just retreat to their rooms with just distance themselves from any sort of familial nucleus type gathering, or kids who always, I mean, kindergartners
Yeah.
who exude extreme rage and extreme anger.
Yeah.
These things are not cute. These are signs and symptoms of something that is happening in the brain. Something has not been done. Some needs have not been met. And if we don't intervene with something, first of all, being aware, to your point, if we don't intervene, Dr. Clark, that trajectory without some miraculous intervention does not look good. So I think we owe it to our people to start helping them see and then equipping them with what to do
Right.
once they see
Right.
that these things are happening.
Yeah, we're going to have to rally both camps,
Yeah, absolutely.
all the camps. That, you're saying that church people don't come to you for services, but are you going to them? Are you interacting with them to get them to see the importance of what you have and what you bring? Well, our time is up. I always enjoy chatting and dialoguing with you.
Absolutely.
Because I believe that you are a gift to the earth that God wants to use to bring transformation in the home and with children and in the minds of men. So I bless your work and what you're doing. Very proud of you. I've known you, I think, all of your life, but I'm very proud of the man that you have become.
Praise God.
Thank you so much for consenting to be on the show.
Absolutely.
And listen, we'll be back next Thursday night at 7:00 p.m. with Unplugged Live. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to comment. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Write something in the chat before you leave. We appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week at 7:00.
Thanks for joining us for Unplugged Live with Dr. Diane Smith-Clark, PhD, helping to bring change and transformation in the mental health space within the church community. Dr. Diane wants to hear from you. If you have any questions, comments, guest recommendations, or program topic ideas, visit DianeUnplugged.com and click the Contact Us link. Dr. Diane also appreciates your prayers and your financial support. You can give online at DianeUnplugged.com and select Donate. If your business or ministry organization is interested in sponsoring this program, you can go to DianeUnplugged.com and click the Contact Us link. Unplugged Live is on all the social media platforms. Just search Dr. Diane Smith-Clark, follow, and subscribe. Unplugged Live with Dr. Diane Smith-Clark, PhD. Healthy mind, wealthy life.